48-hour art check,
That's
round
right.
94. All right. So, yeah, as for a topic, we had talked about doing semiotics, but that might be a longer one.
Hmm.
And then I've also got belonging versus fitting in. Would be kind of interesting from a book I just finished reading.
Nice.
So,
Um, Maybe we can touch on semiotics just for fun.
okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
So we're doing this on a Saturday night, which for those of you who follow the art check, you'll know this is an unusual time, and also, so basically the explanation is family stuff.
Yeah.
So family stuff, and then today was family stuff again because we have Ben has his my niece is spending the night, and so you have two 5-year-olds trying to go to bed, and thus 10 o'clock, 10:30.
Yeah.
So yeah. So should we get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, let's do it.
So, where's my button there? There we go. So, what have you done in the last 48 hours?
So I have done the rough lettering for two of the pages of the anthology, and so my hope is to get the next two pages done before I can get into like roughing out. Like I've already done thumbnails and stuff, so
Yeah.
and then the other one is just inked more panels of my page. So my next page for quarterly stories. So that's kind of where I'm at. What about you? What'd you get done?
So for me, I got this done. This is basically what I've been working on for a little while, and I've been in like a huge slump, which I'll probably talk about during the challenges section. But I have the each character designed, and then I have the rough layout for that, and I'll tighten up kind of the pencils on that ship. But everybody else is pretty much ready to go. There's some weird stuff on the face of the satyr that I need to fix, but basically, like incredibly fast and amazing progress compared to the rest of the week where I didn't get anything done at all. I mean, I just kind of incrementally pushed this thing along, so it's good. Pretty happy with tonight.
That's looking super awesome, Corey.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and I'm jealous of your lettering. I look at that title. Let's see when it comes up, right at the top, and I was like, I need to do like a big masthead title on that anthology, and that just looks so cool. I love that. Anyway, I gotta get better at lettering, but
Nah, I think lettering is one of those things that just takes a while to do. But I equally feel really jealous of that page with the ship. It looks beautiful.
oh,
It's
thanks.
nice, and it's weird, but it doesn't look labored, but like in a good way. Like it looks
Oh, good. Yeah.
really, and I'm suspecting it probably is more labored than it's looking, but it looks like you're making it look easy, even though it's hard.
Yeah, 90% of that was pulling teeth and fighting an uphill battle. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
good that it doesn't look that way.
But it's really pretty, and man, I love the layout. I love the flow of the page. That's really exciting, man.
Yeah, thanks. So how about challenges?
So for me, challenges have been I had a thing that I had to do today that was a professional thing that I can't really talk about for multiple reasons, but that took for like 20,000 times longer. And then I had to do an illustration for a client, and that felt like kind of a challenge because I like the client, but just having to kind of knock out an illustration on top of the 100 days and stuff was a bit of a challenge. And then, as mentioned before, a huge challenge if you want one is to have an early sleepover because Benji doesn't really have people sleep over, and so him having Eliza, his his cousin sleepover was just like it's been chaos. Like
Yeah.
initially they were going to sleep in the same room. We had to put them in separate rooms. So Eliza's in her guest bedroom because they just couldn't like you just hear this whispering and giggling and like go in there and try to be serious, but then walk out and crack up because they're just so goofy. But yeah, that's a challenge, man. It's a
Yeah.
new one. I'm sure will be a continual challenge as they get older.
Yeah. I've done that. I've done that a couple times. We do late overs instead of sleepovers, but yeah, but they just never go to bed. It's just like all right, or whenever we like every couple of years we'll get together like with the extended family and do a big thing, and I'm the parent that's just like, hey guys, let's just enjoy ourselves and not try to impose a bedtime because that is a losing battle. Just let the kids just be somewhere else. And
Yeah.
they'll crash eventually, you know. And everybody's like, no, routine. And I'm like, yeah, but we're on vacation. And you know that it's just going to be a fight for like 6 hours. Nobody ever listens to me, but yeah, it's that's anyway. Uh, we have a I'd rather be drawing Scott in the chat saying that title looks sweet, Josh, and that he likes the ship as well. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So thanks, man.
Thank you. That's cool.
Yeah, challenges for me, week long challenge of just being in a massive slump. Every time I sat down, like huge resistance, distracted by the most minor things, huge amounts of procrastination, and then just like balancing family stuff, and my wife wanted to go on a date last night instead of tonight, which is cool, and so that's one of the reasons why we moved it. And then anyway, just I don't know. Mostly, I wanted to be way farther into this 4-page comic than I am right now, and a lot of it I think I'm just in my own head. I always, every time I start a project, I just haven't gotten to that stage yet where I can just like jump in. It's always this weird argument with myself on on getting it started. I can start it, but actually putting the pencils down in composition, for some reason there's always this hesitation that takes a couple days of me just kind of tinkering. I think that's behind me, but that's been all week this week. Is just like a weird tinkering struggle rather than
Wow.
just jumping in and committing to a composition. So
Yeah, it's a challenge, man, trying to kind of get that like that spark lit, for the just I don't know. Cuz I experience that every once in a while on new projects. I think weirdly enough I haven't had that much on this project, and I think it's because I'm in that zone of like juggling like a bunch of things like juggling a bunch of personal projects, and so it's like I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like it's almost like just don't have time, so I just have to like every
right.
second I have, which is weird because I think we're both in a similar boat. But
I'm in
it,
that stage with client work where I keep getting contacted and I'm putting out bids and I'm having like conversations with clients, but no jobs have started, so I'm not as busy
yeah,
with actual execution right now.
yeah.
It's just in that like getting to know you stage with a couple people, and then kind of like concepting, but it's
So
all
maybe
it's all like verbal stuff. And so I don't know if I'm just not switching back and forth well or what, but I don't know.
no, I think that could be related because thinking about it, for me, when I am in that zone of just make, don't second guess, just make. It's like this beautiful thing, and I can kind of ride it until I stop, and then if I stop, and I have to switch gears or like reboot and start a whole new thing,
Hmm.
where that's the primary focus, it throws me for a loop because it's
Yeah,
like I'm not in that mode of like I just don't have time, just get it, and like weirdly enough, I don't know what it is, but it's like I think there's this kind of where I'm at right now, it feels like there's a slight confidence, but it's like a fake confidence because I just don't have time to second guess or lack the confidence. Like similar, like even with the 100 days thing, usually on a project like that, I'd have a lot of like weird kind of wobbling.
Yeah.
But like once I had picked a target, it's just like I don't know. I kind of feel like a shark. Like if I just stop swimming, I'm just gonna sink right now. So I'm just kind of swimming and going with it. And what's surprising is like um, it does make a lot of progress. So I'm kind of curious if that's going to continue,
Yeah.
or if like I'm going to hit a little rut too, because usually I do hit like a wobble at some point. It's
Yeah.
really been weird
It's
not
that
having
it's
that.
that uphill downhill thing. I mean, you're in a downhill,
Yeah,
production right now where you just got the wind at your back and you're just getting as much mileage under you as you can. And
yeah, and I think that's probably the case where you're at. Is like it sounds like you've reached kind of the top,
yeah,
and so you're going to have that come downhill. You
yeah,
know,
for sure. And
yeah,
I felt like I was just pedaling uphill all week this week, but tonight finally, because it was like all day I was trying to get stuff done and I just couldn't. And my daughter had kind of one of those meltdowns that
oh
you're a
no,
bad parent if you skip that. And it was a really good conversation, like eventually,
yeah,
but it took a couple hours to get there. And anyway,
yeah,
and so it was just all day
yeah,
trying to get to it. And I finally sat down to get to it around 9 p.m. And it's a Saturday, and I was hoping to put in a good 8 hours or so. But even with all that, I still felt like it was pretty productive.
yeah.
And so I feel like I kind of crested that hill, and I'm hoping that I can ride that out over the next couple of days and knock out quite a few pages.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you got achieved looks really good, and it doesn't look like it's going to require a lot of revision. So if you're in that zone, like that's good. So maybe some of this week has been like necessary, kind of back planning in your
Yeah,
head, so that this whole thing's ready. So yeah,
yeah, for sure.
um, Abe's in the chats and said, hey,
Hey,
Abe,
Abe.
glad to have you. All right,
So how about
so
plans for you? What are your plans for the next couple of days?
yeah, so I'm just planning on, let's see. So by Monday, I'd like to have at least two panels inked for quarterly stories for that next page,
Uh huh.
and then I'd like to have the rough lettering for both the remaining pages, so that I can start like assembling reference photos and starting sketching and all that fun stuff. So
Cool.
yeah,
And for me, I'm gonna try to get one, if not two, of these pages to this stage. I'd like to be at least halfway there, if not three-quarters of the way there. So it's a 4-page story. I've got one penciled. While I'm in this kind of mode of kind of problem solving and composition, I'd
yeah,
like to get one or two more out, and I think I can do that. I'll have some time. I'll have maybe an hour or two tomorrow afternoon, and then on Monday I'll be able to get a little bit more. So probably realistically before Monday, before we go live, at least one page I think is where I'll be.
man.
So
I love it. I love the mermaids too. Like,
oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, they were kind of
that's
fun.
really
It's based off one of my fish. I have this fish that if the tank is lit and I turn the lights off in the room, he sees his reflection and starts like fighting himself. And he's a big fish. He's like 12 to 14 inches long, and he like his gills go out, and he's got teeth and stuff, and this big old mouth. It's like an inch wide. Just attacks the tank. It's so funny. So yeah, so those mermaids are based on a tiger Oscar cichlid.
that's,
If you know what those are, but yeah. So
that's awesome.
all right. So should do a topic. We said we're going to stick to 15. We're at 15 now. Do you want to
Hmm.
try to go another few?
Well, let's go another few and just kind of touch on a topic. So we're gonna graze the surface of the topic of semiotics, and so why I thought that was an interesting topic is semiotics is like yeah. I'm gonna I'm gonna try to I'm gonna give an attempt at defining it, but it's basically a symbol that translates to textual or data, like meaning of data, um, that's basically represented with the symbol. And so semiotics are usually considered like one of the higher levels of thinking, and it's definitely a specific trait that's pretty unique to human beings as far as we know. And um and to me, I find semiotics to be a really cool topic. There's some things I particularly find interesting about semiotics. And part of it is because the act of creating comics is kind of creating semiotic symbols. Creating art is like creating semiotic symbols that have deeper meaning, even though it's just indicated by much simpler marks.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, I think I find it fascinating
Yeah,
for
and
that
and
reason.
if that doesn't make sense, the basic gist of it is that we all have a symbol system, and comics are an excellent example of this. There's no reason for us to believe that certain lines mean certain things, but as a society, we've all agreed that lines in a specific organization are conveying some sort of thing. So, for example, if something has flies flying around it in a comic, then we know that that thing smells, right? You know that that thing smells bad. If there's
Yeah,
if there's a squiggly mark above someone's head and it tapers to a point, we know that that person is angry, right?
yeah,
There's certain symbols that we've agreed to, and it even extends beyond that. To be somewhat, I think semiotics can be useful and they can be extremely problematic. And
yeah,
so, one of the things that a good drawing instructor will do if you are a student that is basic and starting out is try to break you out of that symbol system, because with the symbol system, it's super useful. Like, I don't have to read the word stop on a stop sign to know what I need to do. I see a stop sign. It's an octagon. It's red. There's white lettering and a white border on it. That communicates to me a series of actions and muscle reflexes that I should do to slow my car down at a certain speed. There's a lot of math and instinct that kind of just kicks in at that point in
yeah,
time. And so symbols can be super useful, right? In a number of different ways. But a good example is ask someone who has never learned observational drawing to draw a hand, and tell them they can take their time. And what they'll draw is they'll draw a hand with all of your fingers completely spread out and totally rigid. That's the
uh-huh,
semiotic symbol, right? Which is redundant, but that's the semiotic for a hand. But that's not what hands look like. We don't walk around. We don't like wave at people like this. We don't like
yeah,
try to pick things up like this. And so the upside of semiotics is that once a symbol is established, we can use that to communicate. But the downside is that if you are not aware of your own symbol system that's ingrained in your brain, then it will get in the way of your art, because you will begin drawing super cliche things, or
yeah,
things that don't even make sense.
yeah. And so I think the thing tying into that with students, it's like I think one of the key things that makes the difference between somebody who kind of ends up keeping with art and somebody who gives up on art is that there's a certain age where you are kind of trained, and I think it might be a bad move on the part of school systems where they're training kids like you draw a house and it's a box with a triangle on the top,
There's a
which is a little more representational than some of the semiotics they learn. Like, this is what a cloud looks like, and
right.
it's not what a cloud looks like. This is what a face looks like, and it's two dots and like a curve and in a circle, and some of those semiotics are really destructive to observational drawing
Right.
because you start programming your mind to kind of go with the semiotic of culture. I wouldn't call that the only semiotic because we're pretty much peddling in semiotics making art,
Yeah.
but it's cliche semiotics that we want to avoid. Um, and yet there's some beautiful semiotics that I feel are underutilized in like cartooning and in art. Like, for instance, like the sweat bullets. I love sweat bullets. I think they're amazing. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's like, in old Mickey Mouse cartoons when he'd get stressed out or like, like a little worried, like these little beads of sweat would like fly, usually two on each side would kind of fly out. And I think that's great. Or the scribble. I really like that angry scribble above the head. And I think those things can be used, but the difference being you shouldn't be relying on them. And I think that's what Corey's talking about is like a lot of the time you'll have art students who've kind of started relying on semiotics as a crutch rather than as a communication tool. And sometimes, like, once again, sometimes it's better to use a wide vocabulary than like really obvious words, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah,
And
yeah,
Abe in the chat is bringing up some examples. Spider sense, right? We've been taught, those of us that have read Marvel comics have been taught that spider sense means, you know, there's squiggly lines that are kind of emanating. Now, those don't exist in reality, right? We're not. No one looks at that and thinks that Peter Parker all of a sudden has grown lines out of his head. Those are an indication of his spider sense, right? Or you know, the sharp lines out of somebody's mouth when they're yelling or whatnot.
yeah,
And so I think those are really good examples. I'll tell you an example from my own personal life. I was drawing the Tongue-Cut Sparrow, which is a Japanese fairy tale that I finished earlier last year, and there's a lot of foliage, a lot of bushes, and a lot of whatever. And I kept drawing all these bushes, and I kept just trying to figure out why my bushes looked so bad, why they looked so off. And then I realized that I had not looked at a bush. Like
yeah,
I hadn't pulled up images of bushes, and I was pulling solidly from my symbol system, which had come from like Disney cartoons, like
yeah,
old Donald Duck cartoons and stuff. Like Donald Duck doesn't have feathers; he's got two little kind of jagged lines that indicate the idea of feathers, and the rest of him is just a smooth line, right? And I was doing the same thing with my bushes. I was like, bushes are round, and so I do this little cloud thing, and then I'd be like, but it's not a cloud. Here's two leaves to tell you that it's not a cloud. And then once I actually recognized that that was happening in my work, I looked up a bunch of art. I looked up a bunch of
yeah,
artists that were doing things with bushes and stuff. There was a particular issue of Wonder Woman where she was in the jungle, and I looked at how they were doing that, and then I was like, oh right, yeah. There's a pattern, and there's, you know, and so I started looking at how nature actually has patterns, and now that I've broken out of that symbol system, I can draw and ink foliage almost without looking at anything because I've rebuilt that part of my brain to have a more complex series of symbols rather than that's based on observation rather
mhm,
than based on other people's artwork and based on you know, just ideas and concepts. And so that's a good example of how you could recognize a flaw in your art because of a symbol and then rebuild a greater and deeper and richer series of symbols that you can use and control.
got it. Okay, so now I want to go kind of, should I say macro? I was about to say, but anyhow, I do think we should take this to a different level on the topic of semiotics while we got like a minute or so left. Um, So what's interesting to me is that the semiotic form of telling of sequential storytelling predates all the way to like Egyptian hieroglyphs to Roman columns. It's been like comics in themselves. Sequential storytelling through art has existed for really long period of time. And what's interesting is a lot of people equate semiotics to higher intelligence and to intelligent thought. What's interesting is semiotics infer that there's like a deeper meaning. And what's been interesting to me, and this is just a little side note, but it's just something I find fascinating, is that like even in science where things are really reductivist and move down to like the smallest particle, and then it's let's take apart the smallest particle, it's all going to be everything's going to be composed of something simple and something simpler and simpler and simpler. And to me, one of the most fascinating things, and this is just a mind-blowing thing, is that when you get down to DNA, it's actually semiotic. And so there is semiotics composing our very being. And so, like, when you're working on comics or you're working on art, realize you're getting in touch with the same form that is composing our very elements, our very DNA, which I think is kind of cool.
So would it be fair to say that the more generalized your visual semiotics are, dangerous they are, and the more broken down and specific and granular they are, the more useful they are.
That's probably a good point. I would say there's this really great thing that I think Chris Ware talks about a lot, and I think he's very effective at. And I don't think everybody who buys into this theory should like emulate Chris Ware. And my art by no means does this because I'm not like drawing like icons. I tend to be drawing like a lot of cross hatching and useless detail. But one of the things that he harps on um, as a reason that he executes comics the way he does is that it dawned on him after trying to do comics for years and years and years that comics should read more similarly to music notes because of their semiotic nature. They should be something you can follow on a sheet and then play in your head. And so to him, like the more clear and concise the story is within the panels, that's what it's about, is clarity and conciseness. And this is something to be aware of no matter how complex your art is. Visually, you should be able to play that story from left to right very easily. And so I would say that clarity is going to make your semiotics effective. And then personalization and style is how you're going to make your semiotics look different from an airplane manual, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I don't know if this is disagreeing or adding to, but I actually think that clarity is super important, but completely and totally useless if it doesn't land with some sort of emotional impact. And so
Agreed.
the things that we remember are not necessarily because of the clarity of them, but because of their impact on us, the effect that they have. And so I will remember very, very clearly moments in a book that I've listened to, or a comic that I've read, or a movie I've watched, because of the truth in it, and the way that truth plays out in my nostalgia, or in my guilt, or in my love, or in my joy. And you can see that. I have, for example, a real quick example, because we're out of time. I have like a very strong connection to Joseph Conrad's short story Youth, which is a great story, but not necessarily as great as I think it is, because I read it at a time in my life where I really needed that. And I was on my first real motorcycle trip. I was living on the streets at the time, not permanently, but because I was on this trip. And so everything was very raw. And I didn't talk to a lot of people for weeks on end because of what I was doing. And so that story had a significant impact because of the timing and the environment. And that's why I remember it, because I'm reading it now, and I just read it a month ago again, and I'm actually like, oh yeah, I'm remembering this, but I'm remembering it in the context where I read it before. I'm remembering those moments in the story that I read because I imagine reading it next to that stream, or on the beach, or at that one diner that I stopped at, or whatever. And so that I think the impact of it is important. Now, the clarity is also important, but I think you can be completely clear and very communicate very well something that doesn't land an impact, and I don't think it's going to last.
I agree. And so I think to tie this together, because I think we are kind of in agreement, it's that the clarity, keeping with that music note analogy, the clarity is like the clarity to be able to have the notes read so that someone can play it. However, what they're playing could be complete crap if you're writing bad music.
Right. Yes, that's a good point.
So clarity is just to kind of compose, but what you're composing is kind of tying into what Cory was talking about, where you should be composing stuff with heart, and I think we'd be in agreement about that. So,
Yeah.
but let us know what you guys think about semiotics. I feel like we could probably talk for like hours on semiotics and the implications of semiotics, and the downside of common semiotics, and all sorts of stuff. But
Yeah, and
thank you.
I think in the future, I think a thing on cliche versus originality would be really interesting as it pertains to semiotics and other things. So
I
we should.
love it.
I'll note that down.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, thanks so much for everybody who joined us in the chats. You can check out my work at quarterlystories.com. You can check out Cory Kerr's work at corykerr.com. And then if you are following this on iTunes, please leave us a nice 5-star ranking and a review, because we're trying to get the podcast heard by as many people as possible, and that helps that happen. Thanks to everybody, and I hope you guys have a good day.